Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into something complex. How mental health care actually works for kids and teenagers.
It really is complex. It's way more than just finding the right diagnostic box.
Exactly. Our source today is a really comprehensive chapter covering the main ways we approach treatment for young people.
And the goal, echoing what the psychiatrist Leo Eisenberg said, is moving beyond just classifying. It's about learning to truly listen to what the young person is going through, understanding their specific distress.
Right. So our mission here is to break down the history, the theories, and how these treatments actually play out from psychodynamic ideas to, well, whole systems of care.
Yeah, hopefully giving you some aha moments about why therapy for a 7-year-old looks so different from what a 17-year-old might need.
Let's start then with the deep roots. Psychodynamic psychotherapy, or PDP. Where does this whole story begin when we talk about kids?
Well, interestingly, Sigmund Freud himself was actually pretty skeptical about analyzing children directly. His famous case, Little Hans, back in 1909, that was analyzed mostly by the boy's father, with Freud supervising.
Huh. So not direct analysis?
Not really, no. The big shift came later. With pioneers like Anna Freud and Melanie Klein, they realized, you can't just have a kid lie on a couch and free associate like an adult.
Okay, so what was the medium then?
Play. For younger kids especially, play is their natural language. It's how they express things, work through conflicts.
And that led pretty quickly to a major disagreement, right, between Anna Freud and Melanie Klein.
Oh, absolutely. A fundamental split that, in some ways, you still see echoes of today. Klein saw kids as having these really powerful, intense drives from the very beginning.
Okay.
So she pushed for direct, strong interpretations of their play, seeing it as equivalent to adult free association, really getting at deep unconscious stuff.
And Anna Freud.
She took a different tack, more gentle, sort of educative. She saw the child as still developing, immature. Her focus was more on strengthening the ego and helping the child get back onto a healthy developmental track.
And she worked with parents more.
Yes, crucially, she saw working with parents as essential, which was something Klein wasn't really interested in.
So that foundational split.
Yeah.
How did things evolve from there? I know the focus shifted towards relationships later on.
That's right. You get the independent school people like Donald Winnicott, who really emphasize the importance of the relationship and the environment.
Winnicott. I always think of the holding environment.
Exactly. That idea of a secure, predictable psychological space, which therapy needs to replicate, is huge. He also gave us concepts like the transitional object, the security blanket, and the idea of the true versus false self, which is about authenticity versus just complying with external demands.
And where is psychodynamic thinking now for kids? Less about those classic Oedipal triangles.
Yeah, much less. The focus now is often more on dyadic issues. The relationship between, say, the child and primary caregiver. Concepts from attachment theory, self-psychology, relational models are all central.
And you mentioned a key concept driving this.
Mentalization, or sometimes called reflective function. Basically, it's the ability to understand behavior, your own and others, in terms of underlying mental states. Feelings, thoughts, intentions, desires.
Like reading minds, but in a good way.
Kind of, yeah. Understanding the why behind actions, not just the actions themselves. It's fundamental for navigating social relationships.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense for therapy, especially since, as you said, kids don't choose to come to therapy.
Exactly. They're brought by parents, so their own motivation can be, well, all over the place. You have to negotiate the why very carefully with the child.
Like that example in the source material. The boy with the fighting puppets.
Precisely. The parents are worried about his irritability, maybe aggression. But the child, through the puppets, might be exploring conflict, power, fear, things he can't easily put into words.
So the therapist's job is?
To create that safe space, interpret the play gently, maybe frame it like, we're trying to understand why you feel upset sometimes, and maybe find ways to help you feel better. The work happens in the play, in that displacement.
Okay, so that's looking inside, using play and relationship. Let's shift gears now to something more. Action-oriented, cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT.
Right, the cognitive revolution. A big pivot from just looking at unconscious drives. Early behaviorists like Watson kind of ignored thoughts, but then in the 60s, people like Beck, Albert Ellis.
Bandura, too.
Bandura, yes. They brought cognition front and center. The core idea being our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are all interconnected. Change one, especially dysfunctional thoughts, and you can change the others.
And CBT is known for being quite structured, goal-oriented. It uses something called collaborative empiricism. What's that about?
It means the therapist and the child or adolescent work together like a team of scientists. They don't just accept negative thoughts as facts. Instead, they treat them as hypotheses, things to be investigated and tested out in the real world. They set clear, specific, observable goals together.
So how do you start figuring out what needs changing?
A key tool is the ABCs. You track the antecedents, what happened right before the problem behavior. Then the behavior itself, what did the child actually do? And finally, the consequences, what happened after. This helps you see what triggers the behavior and what might be reinforcing it, keeping it going.
Makes sense. And Beck's negative triad is a classic CBT concept, especially for depression.
Yes, the negative triad. A pessimistic view of the self, I'm worthless, the world, everything is awful, and the future, it's never going to get better. CBT directly targets these kinds of thoughts.
What if a teenager is just convinced they'll fail everything? How do you challenge that without, just arguing?
That's where cognitive restructuring comes in. You don't just say, no, you won't fail. You teach them to examine the evidence. You might use dispute handles, specific questions like, okay, you feel like you'll fail, but are you 100% sure that will happen?
Ah, okay. Questioning the certainty.
Exactly. Or what's the evidence for that thought? What's the evidence against it? Or what's the worst that could happen? Could you cope with that? The goal is to help them develop more balanced, realistic thoughts. Like in the example of the depression diary, tracking the thought, the feeling, and then working on a more rational response.
So it's about thinking differently, but you mentioned action earlier.
Absolutely. CBT isn't just talk. Two huge action components are exposure and behavioral activation.
Exposure sounds intense.
It can be, but it's incredibly effective, especially for anxiety disorders and OCD. The whole point is to break the cycle of avoidance. If you're scared of something, you avoid it, which provides short-term relief but keeps the fear going long-term.
So for a kid scared of the dark.
You might use behavioral approach tasks, gradually increasing the time spent in dimly lit, then darker rooms. Starting small, proving that the bad thing they fear doesn't actually happen. It systematically dismantles the fear.
And behavioral activation, that's more for depression.
Yes. Depression often involves withdrawal, low energy, not doing things you used to enjoy, which leads to less positive reinforcement, which makes you feel worse.
Yeah.
It's a vicious cycle.
Right.
So behavioral activation involves systematically scheduling and increasing activities, pleasant activities, social activities, tasks that give a sense of mastery or accomplishment. Even small things can start to break that cycle and rebuild momentum.
Sounds very practical.
It is. And because it's structured and has clear goals, it's become, the gold standard psychosocial treatment for many conditions, particularly anxiety, depression, OCD. We also have good evidence, like from the KMS and POTS studies, that combining CBT with medication, like an SSRI, is often more effective than either one alone for moderate to severe cases.
Okay, so we've covered individual therapy approaches. But kids exist in systems, families, peer groups. Let's talk about group therapy first. What does putting kids together add?
Well, peers are just so important during development, right? So group therapy leverages that. Irvin Yalom identified key therapeutic factors in groups, and two really stand out for kids and teens.
Which are?
One is universality, just that immense relief of realizing, wow, I'm not the only one feeling this way or dealing with this problem. It combats isolation.
That makes sense. And the other?
Interpersonal learning. In a group, you get immediate feedback on how you come across to others, how your behavior impacts them. It's a safe place to try out new ways of relating.
And the source mentioned parents are often involved too.
Yes, especially for younger kids. The research backs this up. For instance, one study found that for kids exposed to domestic violence, having a combined child plus mother group worked better than just treating the child alone. The parent reinforces the skills learned.
Right, reinforces the skill. Okay, now let's broaden the lens even further to family therapy. This feels like a whole different way of thinking.
It really is. The fundamental shift is moving away from seeing the problem as residing solely within the child to understanding how the entire family system might be contributing to or maintaining the problem.
Based on systems theory.
Exactly. General systems theory, the idea that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And cybernetics, which looks at communication patterns and feedback loops within the family.
So interactions are circular, like a parent nags, the teen withdraws, the parent nags more.
Precisely. It's not just linear cause and effect. Everyone's behavior influences everyone else's in an ongoing cycle. Family therapy tries to interrupt those unhelpful patterns.
Wow. What do family therapists actually do?
There are different models. Some structural or strategic approaches might try to shift family roles or hierarchies, maybe externalize the problem so the family unites against it. Others, like cognitive behavioral family therapy, focus more on communication skills training or parent management training, like parent-child interaction therapy, which coaches parents in specific skills.
And understanding the family's culture must be absolutely critical here.
Oh, vital. You can't impose a one-size-fits-all model. The therapist has to understand and respect the family's values, beliefs, worldview.
The source gives examples, like differing focuses on individual versus extended family.
Right. It notes that, generally speaking, white families might emphasize individual achievement more, while African American families often place high value on extended kin and community support. Hispanic families frequently navigate acculturation stress.
Can you talk about that example, Anna, the teenager?
Yeah, it's a great illustration. Anna felt caught between two worlds, the expectations of her immigrant parents, rooted in Mexican culture, and the pressures of being an American teen. Lots of conflict, feeling pulled in different directions.
So the therapy wasn't about choosing one culture over the other.
Not at all. The therapist's role was to help Anna and her parents understand each other's perspectives, acknowledge the stress Anna was under, and find ways to compromise and achieve mutual acceptance, honoring the parents' heritage while validating Anna's experience.
That sounds incredibly important. Okay, let's move to our last big area, medication and the unique challenges of adolescence itself. Medicating kids, that's always a fraught topic.
It is, and it requires real caution and expertise. Kids are definitely not just small adults when it comes to psych meds.
Why not? What's different biologically?
A key difference is pharmacokinetics, basically, how the body processes the drug. Children, especially younger ones, tend to have faster metabolisms. Their livers are relatively larger and more efficient at breaking down medications via enzymes like the cytochrome P450 system.
Meaning they clear the drug faster?
Often, yes, which can affect dosing levels and timing. For example, lithium might need different dosing strategies in kids compared to adults because of how their kidneys handle it, too.
And the evidence for which drugs actually work in kids is sometimes limited, right?
For some conditions, yes. For major depression, for instance, the evidence is strongest for fluoxetine and escitalopram. Those are the only two SSRIs currently FDA approved specifically for MDD in youth.
But some medications are used quite specifically.
Right. A good example is melatonin. For sleep-onset insomnia, low-dose melatonin is often the preferred first step pharmacologically because it works with the body's natural clock, its chronobiotic properties, and it's effective at low doses with a generally good safety profile for short-term use.
Okay, let's talk about the teenage brain itself. This seems like a period of, well, high vulnerability.
Extremely high vulnerability. There's so much happening neurobiologically. One major factor is that the frontal lobes, the brain's CEO responsible for planning, judgment, impulse control, are still under construction.
The wiring isn't finished.
Essentially, yes. The process of myelination, which speeds up nerve signals, isn't complete. And there's also significant apoptosis, or programmed cell death, pruning away unused connections, happening roughly between ages 14 and 26.
So what does that mean for behavior?
It means their capacity for complex problem solving and good judgment can be seriously compromised, especially in what the text calls hotly affective environments.
Meaning when emotions run high.
Exactly. In a calm situation, a teen might reason things out quite well, but add peer pressure, strong emotions, stress, and that still developing frontal lobe can get overwhelmed, leading to impulsive or risky decisions. It helps explain that classic teenage volatility.
And that biological vulnerability crashes right into the modern social world.
It's a perfect storm, really. The source notes that something like 95% of teens have smartphones, constant connectivity, social media pressures,
Which can contribute to.
increased loneliness despite connection, heightened risks like sexting or distracted driving, and tragically, increased suicide risk, partly through contagion or copycat effects seen online.
And suicide rates are terrifyingly high.
Devastatingly high. It's the second leading cause of death for young people aged 10 to 24 in the U.S. That statistic alone underscores the urgency.
When things reach a crisis point, what does the system of care look like?
Well, at the most acute level, there's inpatient care. That's for stabilization, when there's immediate danger to self or others. But crucially, it should be seen as a short-term launching point back to less restrictive care.
And ideally, that's community-based.
Yes. The ideal model is the community systems of care approach. This is all about providing individualized, intensive, flexible support within the child's home, school, and community. It means coordinating different agencies, mental health, education, maybe juvenile justice, social services to wrap support around the child and family.
So wrapping this all up, this deep dive really shows that treating kids and teens isn't one thing. It's this complex integration of biology, psychology, development, family, society.
Absolutely. It's multidisciplinary at its core. And the goal isn't just getting rid of symptoms, it's much more ambitious, promoting psychological growth, getting them back on track developmentally.
Which brings us to maybe a final thought for our listeners to consider.
Yeah, given everything we've discussed, the emotional intensity, the nonlinear brain development, the social pressures, how do we, as parents, teachers, clinicians, anyone involved with young people, distinguish normal adolescent Sturm-und-Drang, that typical turmoil, from a genuine clinical issue that needs intervention?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It really is. We know about 20%, 1 in 5 adolescents, could benefit from clinical help. So the question to ponder is, what are those critical, maybe subtle signs? Perhaps a sustained change in functioning across different areas like school, home, friendships, a real departure from their baseline that signal something more serious is going on, something that needs professional attention. Getting that right is where the art meets the science.
A really vital point to end on. Thank you so much for walking us through all this essential information today.
My pleasure. It's crucial stuff to understand.